Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for you all for being here today. My name is Tom Ciavarella. I am the head of public affairs for Frontiers. I am based in Chicago. I am typically going to Washington, D.C. to talk to people about the importance of science and to funding science. So already this is the most receptive crowd I've had in the past 4 months. Thank you very much for being here. Frontiers has a very straightforward mission. It is healthy lives on a healthy planet. And we think that the best way to achieve that is through open science. Now, why specifically open science? Well, all of us have lived through a period in our lives just 5 years ago where we saw the benefits of open science. A lot of things had to come together for us to go only a year between being told to stay home to having shots in our arms. Imagine what open science can do for all of the other everyday health concerns that we as a world have. This is a chart up here that shows some of the major issues that we deal with regardless of borders and how much of the research about it is available openly. It's not much. At Frontiers, everything we publish is fully open from the moment that it's available. No embargoes, no subscriptions. You could go on our website right now and you could read every article that we've ever published over the past 18 years. And that's especially important for what brings us here this week, the climate. There is not enough climate science that's openly available. And when you put paywalls in place, when you make it harder for people to get accurate information, you also make it easier to get disinformation. So Frontiers is trying to combat that in a number of ways. In a lot of ways, we work the way any other publisher does. We have hundreds of journals. They cover all of the physical sciences and the social sciences that you can think of. But we also try to align them very sustainably as well. So we have journals that are aligned with the UN's sustainability goals. That is something that we take very seriously. It's working. Open science is an idea whose time has come. We're never going to say that our business model is the right, true, one way to do things, but there's evidence that says it works. The more open we are, the better it's going to be for all of us and for the planet. We have billions of views. We have millions upon millions of citations because research that can't be found might as well not exist. You want people to find your research, to cite it, to use it, to learn from it, to build on it. And as I said, we're showing that it works. Frontiers has only been in existence for about 18 years. We are now the 5th most cited publisher. Any of you who have published know that citations are the coin of the realm. Citations are what get you noticed. We are helping our authors get noticed at scale. And we cannot do it alone. Frontiers certainly has hundreds of employees all over the world, but what truly drives Frontiers are the authors and the editors of our journals. We work with people all over the world. We started in Europe, so naturally most of our editors are in Europe. Frontiers made a concerted effort about 5 years ago to break into the United States, so we don't have a physical office in the U.S. They just hire us as they need us, which is why I'm based in Chicago. We have people in New York, on the West Coast, all over. And of course, all of our editors, our journal editors, our board members, they come from universities all over the United States as well. Now, we mostly make money, or we started making money through what's called the APC, the article processing charge. We realize people don't love that. We have shifted over the years to flat fee agreements with universities. So we work with hundreds of universities all over the world. We have 18 years of data to build off of now. We can go to schools and say, here's how many of your researchers publish with Frontiers. What if we struck some kind of a deal whereby instead of an article payment being paid out of this budget, this grant, you don't have access to all of that information? What if we signed a flat fee deal? Takes away all of the friction for all of your authors. We do this at the institutional level. We also do it at the national level. In Europe, we go to a lot of the ministries of education and other groups striking those deals as well. In the United States, it's a bit more one by one, but all over the world, there are different models. I have to talk about AI, but I promise this is only one slide. Frontiers started doing AI a very long time ago. We really fashion ourselves as a technology company that happens to publish. So we hire a lot of developers. We started a number of years ago running all of the manuscripts that we receive through an AI engine. So even before one of our editors touches it, it gets scored in such a way that tells our editors, Do we like this? Do we not like this? Do we see any red flags? Do we want to give higher or lower emphasis to this article? So that AI has been working very well for us. It was written up 5 years ago in the New York Times, so we're certainly not just hopping on this bandwagon. It's something that we're very good at already. My world is the outreach and advocacy world. So we're working with a lot of people. I am going to Washington, D.C., as I had mentioned, but we're also working with funders. We're working with the World Economic Forum. We're, in fact, a co-publisher of the WEF's Emerging Technologies Report, which comes out every June. They identify 10 emerging technologies. You'll be hearing and seeing a lot more of that when that new report comes out in June. The other things that we do for advocacy now fall onto the other side of the business. So Frontiers, the publisher, is a for-profit entity. We do have a nonprofit entity, which is what brings me here today, the Frontiers Research Foundation. And that research foundation takes the expertise from the for-profit side and puts it into new markets. One of the most exciting things that we do is Frontiers for Young Minds. This is a science journal for school children, reviewed by school children, working alongside seasoned experts and researchers. This is a fantastic way to get science into primary schools all over the world. We do it in a lot of different languages as well. So even though, for better or for worse, English is the language of science, we translate this content into many languages so it can be used in schools all over the world. It's had a fantastic reception. It's won a number of awards. It's up for another award next month, as a matter of fact, from the Society for Scholarly Publishing. It's been great, and as I said, we get fantastic people. Nobel winners over the past 3 years, 30 of them in total, have volunteered to work with children to review articles that the children have written, to teach them the peer review process, to help them understand how science is done. We're trying to spark this in people. What really brings me here today is the other thing that the Frontiers Research Foundation does, which is the Frontiers Planet Prize, which is now in its 3rd year. We are fashioning this as if it were the Nobel Prize for Sustainability. And because we're Swiss, we're doing it on a country-by-country basis. We're doing it like the Olympics. So the Frontiers Planet Prize is giving away 3 awards of $1 million apiece to researchers based on a research article that they have written. One article. This is not a body of work. This is not a brand new researcher. This is to and for a researcher who has shown an expertise and a body of work, who has been nominated by their institution and then ultimately by their country to come in front of the jury for the Frontiers Planet Prize to earn one of those $1 million awards. We are judging this according to the 9 planetary boundaries that have been identified by the UN. These are the boundaries that we need to make sure we don't breach, or don't breach any worse than we already have, to ensure stability and sustainability and healthy lives on a healthy planet. As I said, we start very small and then we get very large. So we have the individual researchers doing amazing work in their own labs. Those labs, those universities then bring those papers to a board inside of a nation. The nation chooses 3 winners from that country to give to the Planet Prize. And in the 3 years that we've been doing this, the number of institutions has risen dramatically. So we started with just over 200. We're now at over 600 institutions. More countries are becoming involved. More universities and funders are becoming involved. And these are some of the national academies that we work with. Here in the United States, we have the National Academies of Sciences. And then all over the world, we have a number of other high-quality partners. This is the jury of 100. It's chaired by Professor Johan Rockström. This jury has met already this year a number of times to choose the 19 winners of their nation. So these are the finalists. 3 of those 19 in June are going to be awarded one of those 3 $1 million awards. This is a photo from last year's award ceremony, and just a few statistics on the reach of this award. Awards take time. There's a lot of awards out there in the world, and I was talking to someone else too, saying that there's a lot of awards being given out by companies for sustainability who you wouldn't immediately equate with sustainability, and it makes you wonder, why are they giving out these awards? That's what we're trying to combat. as well. This is true research and openness and true sustainability, and we're getting a lot of attention because of it. We expect even more for June's announcement. Before I move on to who those 19 winners are and let you have a look at them, I just need to point out that all of this work is being organized in-house for Frontiers by Jean-Claude Bergelman and Gilbert D. Gregorio. They too are leading quite a team at the Frontiers Research Foundation to put together this jury of 100, to work with all of the national academies and then all of the winners as well. And without further ado, these are our 2025 national champions. They are listed alphabetically by country. Listed last is the United States, and also last by first name is Zia, who you're going to hear from in a moment. Zia is our United States national champion for 2025. Zia's research is, again, based upon a single paper. Now, Zia leads a lab at the University of Colorado Boulder, doing a heck of a lot more than just what this one paper shows. But this is what was put forward by his university to the national academies and then to the jury of 100. And it is one of our 19 winners. I will, at this point, turn it over to Zia to talk a little bit about his research. And then after that, we're going to bring a panel up to talk about not just Zia's research, but other matters about the 9 planetary boundaries. Thank you for your time and your attention. Zia, the floor is yours.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much, Tom. And it's wonderful to be here today. Thanks, everyone, for coming. So my name is Zia Mehrabi. As Tom said, I run a lab called the Better Planet Laboratory at the University of Colorado Boulder. And today I'm going to talk to you about the research that was nominated, and we're absolutely thrilled to be national champions for this year's Frontiers Planet Prize. And in particular, what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about how this research can help us understand how we might be able to find solutions for not only the climate crisis, but other pressing environmental issues like biodiversity loss or pollution. And the first thing that I want to say is actually, I think this slide the earlier slide is wrong. And this slide is wrong because it's not just about me. It's actually about a large team of researchers that collaboratively work together to share data, to harmonize this data and really work with farmers in a participatory fashion to collect and think about what we can kind of gather from this data and understand from this data in this participatory process. So it's really a prize, for all of this team of people. Me and this other group of researchers and the network that we have established were very, very, very concerned and are concerned about the current state of agriculture on our planet. One of the kind of key features when we look at agricultural systems and we look at agricultural development is that agricultural development drives a simplification of our landscapes, of our ecosystems, high monocultures, large amounts of pesticides and fertilizers, huge externalities, and it doesn't actually serve us. Massive amounts of malnutrition persist and obesity persists. And so me and the network that I'm speaking to, the work that just generated today, really kind of want to try and solve this problem. And so we came together to try and think about how we might solve this problem. You've seen a graphic like this. Tom put up a graphic like this. When you think about the planetary boundaries, whether you're talking about climate change, agriculture and food systems is 25% of our emissions. Whether you're talking about biodiversity loss, agriculture is the foremost driver of biodiversity loss around the planet today. When you think about land system change, about a third of our planet is used for agriculture at the moment. Freshwater use, it's the foremost driver of, in use of freshwater, nitrogen and phosphorus pollution, and the list goes on. So when we're talking about planetary boundaries and we talk about environmental issues, whether it's climate change or other issues that we care about, we need to solve our food systems problems. For us as researchers, one of the things that we first look towards is nature. It's clear from our current design of food systems and our current design of agriculture that there are design flaws. There are fundamental design flaws in how we grow and produce our food. So we turn to nature to try and understand what could we do better. What can nature teach us about designing our food systems and designing production so that we don't have all of these environmental and social externalities? And so when we look to nature, what we see is actually something vastly different from the current narrative and the way that we push agricultural development. We see plants and animals coupled in systems so that nutrient cycles in those systems. We see change over time. Those systems are dynamic. We see heterogeneity in our landscapes that capture and allow water to infiltrate. We see teeming life in soil and the cycling of nutrients in soil linked to biodiversity in soil that is so depleted in our agricultural systems. And one of the kind of hallmarks of this is we see complexity. It's not a story of simplification. Nature is a story of complexity. So as researchers, we looked at each of these different buckets and asked a simple question. If you increase these different elements in farming systems, does it yield positive benefits? And you can think of all of these different things under this kind of banner of diversity. All of these things are increasing diversity, right? If you would increase these things in our systems. So we got together some years ago now. We started this project. We originally got the funding to pool, or I originally got the funding with a co-PI called Claire Kerman in 2018, 2019, to start to pool together some of the researchers that started this network. And we grew, and I'll talk about how we grew a little bit later. And we asked this, we got a bit of, that's really cool, some auditory diversity as well. It's brilliant. Okay, so we came together to kind of, ask this really simple question, which seems really, really simple. And it's like, if you add more diversity into farms, or you maintain it on farms, and maintaining it's actually really important too, because when we see agricultural development, what we typically see is a consolidation of farmland. Farms get bigger. And when farms get bigger, we see a loss of diversity of that farm, on that farm too, loss of biodiversity, loss of all these different sources of diversity I've been talking about. So we asked this question, if you add some diversity in or you keep it on farms, what happens to the environmental and social outcomes we care about? What happens to, pollution? What happens to food security for many smallholder farmers? What happens to human well-being, income and revenue? What happens to things like yields? What happens to biodiversity? And fundamentally, do we create a better planet for people and nature? So this is kind of represents as a bit of a kind of a data slide. It looks fairly scientific, but the reason for putting it up is that I wanted to show that the researchers that we got together and that have joined this network represent 5 different continents across the world, many different types of farming systems. And each of these different points that you see are tied to researchers, are tied to farmers, covering, small-scale farms, large-scale farms, horticultural farms, field crops, all different types of farming systems. And each of these researchers had been working in these systems and are working in these systems to try and understand this fundamental question. But prior to this project, we'd all been working in isolation. We'd all been looking at kind of the outcomes, these different interventions in our own kind of setting. And so one of the major breakthroughs that we found as researchers was actually coming together and saying, do we find consistent and general effects across these different settings? Is diversity better everywhere? And so this is kind of an illustration of some of those data. What we found was when we compiled this, and it was a long process of participatory design with these researchers and with actually farmers' organizations and other organizations across the world that co-designed this research together. We found that the findings were actually very, very promising. We found that the more you tend to add diversity into these systems, the better the outcomes. Not only did we find that, we found that the common trade-offs that people talk about, like yield declines, we didn't find when we looked across these different studies. And not only that, we actually found in some kind of diversification, you can see this livestock diversification, that's like coupling animal and plant systems that I talked about earlier. You lead to yield increases in these systems too, which makes sense from an ecological perspective. There are other kind of diversification practices I mentioned, soil biodiversity and soil conservation, that we noticed to have and carry important positive benefits. Particularly, we find for biodiversity, but also we found for food security. And many smallholder systems across the world doing improved soil conservation actually improves food security. Experience scales, a number of different metrics that we use to measure food security in these households. So this was really, really promising for us. But then what we found that I think was partially one of the reasons why this got published in Science, and potentially one of the main reasons why I think, alongside the participatory design process, we were nominated for this national award, is that we found something that was surprising. It seems surprising, but actually when you think about it, it's kind of obvious. That as you add more diversification practices, as you do more different ways of doing soil conservation on a farm, as you do more different ways of adding more habitat on the farm, more different ways of adding more diversity into your farm, you actually amplify the positive outcomes. And we found this across these different data sets and a number of different ways of cutting up and doing the analysis. This key result stuck. And so that for us was very, very, very encouraging. Basically, more is better. The more we model our agricultural systems after nature, the better those systems perform. Now, one of the nice things about the outcomes of this study, which is somewhat emergent, is that because we're working on real farms, the outcomes that we find are actually directly applicable. One of the problems that scientists often have is that they'll do experiments in their lab or on a small plot of land or an experimental research station, and they have this fundamental question, and it's the same for other fields too, like in education. Will this scale? When you actually put it out there in the wild, does it work? So this is one of the major benefits that we found in our research, is actually we did it on real-world farms with real-world farmers, and we found that it did work in those settings too. So that's really, really powerful. The other thing is that because we were thinking, and this is, again, a property of having so many researchers working on these things across the world, we were thinking about all of the different ways in which you can diversify. We come up with these kind of buckets and this really nice typology, and within each of them, we have different practices. We actually have something very, very tangible that can be implemented by different organizations across the world in terms of on-the-ground solutions. It wasn't theoretical. These are things you can go out and you can design policy around. There's obviously a policy window for this kind of work as well. A few years ago, the UN Food Systems Summit highlighted diversification as a key pathway to transformation. But the real-world evidence for this working at scale was lacking, and this work provides really good evidence that it can work. And more than anything, that investment in this kind of thinking and looking to nature for solutions actually can be beneficial. And that kind of changes our thinking about agricultural development. It changes our thinking about development. It changes our thinking about who we are as a species and how we operate on the planet. And I'll get to that in a minute. The other key point here is that we can actually scale up. And we actually started with actually a small collection of researchers. In fact, it started for me. I did my PhD on diversification, so it started a long time for me. But I think it was 2017. I was sitting in a workshop, and I was listening to a number of women leaders who were doing agroecology research, and they were doing it against all the odds, right? Women in science, very, very difficult as it is. Working on an issue like this, where everything's against you, and then I was sitting there watching these women talk about their work, and I was extremely inspired by their stories and by the data that they were collecting. And this pushed me to thinking and working together with these amazing leaders to think about how we could come together and share data and actually build, a better understanding, a bigger evidence base. And so it started there. We wrote this grant, and we got the money to do the first workshop, where there were 10 to 15 of us, and then we actually had a stakeholder advisory committee which was the same size. So we had one-to-one stakeholder advisors and researchers. But very quickly, what we found was we grew. Over a short period of time, we grew. We quadrupled in size in terms of the researchers, and ended up pulling in data from all of these different places. Now, we think this is just scratching the surface. We know there are other organizations, there are other researchers, there are other farmers around the world that we can engage in this research too. And so we see massive potential to scale this up. And I think what we found ourselves is that by working together, not alone, we can actually build strong coalitions. And I think this is a really important point for everything that's going on in the world right now, right? This kind of story of collective action, the story of building networks, and joining forces is very, very important and fundamental to change. And for us, like as scientists, finding new innovations, right? So things that get us excited as well. Now, I just want to end on this point. If you look at where agricultural development has come over the last, 300 years, which was a story of expansion and then intensification, and then you look at what's going to happen over the next 50, 100 years, just based on what we expect from economic development and economic policy and development, agricultural development policy, which is a story of farmers coming out of farming and farms increasing in size and increasing mechanization. This is what you'd expect. You'd expect that even if agricultural land stays constant, we're going to see a massive decline in the number of farms globally over the next century. In fact, we're going to see a halving in the number of farms over the next century. That's hundreds of millions of farms won't exist anymore. And it's not that they're going to be removed off the face of the planet. They're going to be consolidated. We're just going to have very many fewer farms, and they're all going to be doubly as big, right? On average, right? So this is concerning because if you think about what's happened when we've seen consolidation, we've seen a reduction in diversity from our farming systems, right? Which doesn't look good from a biodiversity perspective, and it doesn't look good for many of these other outcomes we care about. But, and this is kind of the positive side of the story, is that agricultural development doesn't have to look like that. Even if we have consolidation of farmland, we can still envision a world where those farms are diverse. And that's completely different from anything, we've seen in the world. But our research shows that it's actually possible and there are actually benefits that can come from it. So what I'd like you to do is just close your eyes for 10 seconds and think about the future of agriculture and the future of landscapes. Visualize a landscape that is dear to you, where, you may have experienced agriculture before, and think about the diversity that we might want to see there. The harmony that we want to see in terms of humans living with nature, and the benefits that will bring to the environment and to society. Thank you.